Supply chains, once invisible, now in crisis. From pandemics to geopolitical shocks, businesses are scrambling to adapt. Today, we sit down with two of the world's top experts in supply chain to uncover hidden flaws, the game changing strategies, and the future of global trade. If you think supply chains are just about moving boxes, then think again. This conversation might just change the way that you see the world. Welcome to the Expert Talk, the podcast that connects academia to industry, bridging knowledge and practice. And we explore innovative solutions to today's pressing challenges. I'm John Lin, your host and general manager at ExpertGate. Today, we are discussing a topic that's reshaping the global economy: supply chain strategies and solutions in the face of disruption. Joining me are two distinguished guests. First, we have Dr. Mamun Habib, head of the department at the School of Business and Entrepreneurship at Independent University, Bangladesh. Dr. Habib, or Dr. Mamun, has an extensive academic background and has published over 200 research papers focusing on supply chain management. And it also goes into logistics and operations. Welcome, Dr. Habib.
Thank you. Mr. John.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. And today we're also joined with Professor Alan Wynn, Managing Director of Middlebank Consulting Group and an honorary professor at the University of Sydney. Professor Wynn has over 4 decades of experience worldwide with global organizations and really running and enhancing their supply chain and value strategies. Welcome, Professor Wynn. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be part of this podcast.
Lovely. Let's dive straight into it. I mean, supply chain has always been a critical factor in business success, but global disruption over the past couple of years have really tested its limits. Now, Dr. Mamun, let's start with you. How have events like the pandemic and geopolitical conflicts really reshaped supply chain strategies?
Thank you. We can start the two things here. Like when you talk about the disruption, supply chain disruption, we are familiar with this concept during the pandemic time. That is the first time we noticed that the global supply chain has been disrupted due to the pandemic time. And another one time we noticed this disruption due to the Russia-Ukraine war. So the geopolitics is another reason of the supply chain disruption. And not only Russia-Ukraine war, at the same time we noticed the Middle East war, like the country is also going on. So if you look very carefully, supply chain disruption is happening due to the pandemic is one of the example. And then we notice another example from this kind of war, Russia-Ukraine war or the Middle East war. I'd like to give you the specific example. Then suppose during the pandemic time, one of the largest Apple supplier, Western Corporation, they noticed that the disruption due to the pandemic supply disruption, they are planning to move to the different country. So from the China, they are planning to move to the India, Vietnam, and Mexico. They are thinking the different continent to move due to the pandemic. So this is a very one of the learning point is that diversification. Another one is the Samsung, even their mother company in the based on the South Korea. So they noticed this one that due to the pandemic time, due to the lockdown time, they are facing a lot of disruption in the whole supply chain. So they are also planning now that how they can move to the different country like the Vietnam and India. So that is a very important visualization from our perspective, from the academic perspective. Maybe it could be another way we have to think how can think about the supply disruption in terms of diversified sourcing and digitalization technology. I'll talk about the technology later next time, but this is the way that how we can resolve this kind of supply disruption. Thank you.
Well, and Dr. Mamun, do you think this shift to digitalization and these strategies are is this here to stay, or are they just temporary responses to the recent crises?
No, when you adopt the technology, there is some installation cost. So, the latter time you can notice this one. If you invite the technology in the whole supply chain, then definitely your overall responsiveness and overall your performance and effectivity will be enhanced. So this is not the very short time. This technology will be involved. The whole technology should be involved in the supply to customer from the raw materials to finished product. So it is not only just temporary solution, it will be the permanent solution. But problem is that a mindset issue. It is the how we can apply this technology in the whole supply chain, because our
Yes.
earlier supply chain was a paper based. So when you're planning to the move to the digitalization, automation, it is not very easy to adapt within the existing supply chain. So that is another way you have to start to think, because what you said just now, it is the temporary and the permanent solution. We would say the
Yes.
permanent solution. It depends on the now practitioners how they can think.
And Professor Wynn, what are your thoughts? I mean, on these kind of vulnerabilities revealed by these disruptions and this shift towards digitization?
Yeah, certainly. I think what we are going to see is an increasing number of disruptions. So we're in a world where which is in constant change, and as a consequence, we need to build more resilience around our supply chains. And so we're taking slightly different approaches to how we manage those supply chains now. I mean, if I think back before COVID, because that I suppose was a major trigger. I mean, there's always been disruptions in supply chains, but but COVID really turned the world on end in terms of it affect pretty much the whole of the world, albeit at different times. Certain countries went into COVID and others came out, and that in itself created some challenges. But COVID pretty much affected the whole world. So all of a sudden, pre-COVID, I used to have to explain what a supply chain was and what I was involved in. After COVID, everyone knows what a supply chain is. I can tell you that now. You don't actually have to explain what we're involved in. And what this is now meaning, again, if I compare to what used to sort of talk about and plan for pre-COVID, it was around service. It was just a cost of capital and quality. But now we're thinking about resilience. We're thinking about agility. We're thinking about sustainability, and how we change our sourcing arrangements to de-risk some of the vulnerabilities that we're finding ourselves in terms of disruption. If you think about the length of a disruption and the financial impact of that disruption on a business, the research is suggesting that at the moment you can expect to lose about 42% of 1 year's EBITDA every decade as a consequence of disruptions. So we've got to be a bit smarter around how we manage sourcing strategies, and we're tending to think about diversification of suppliers. We're thinking about nearshoring and friendshoring, for want of a description. We're thinking about building in some supplier redundancy. We're looking at how we focus on inventory management. So there's a shift from previously it was all about just in time.
Yes.
Now we're considering just in case. That has a cost to a business, but equally the cost of the disruption can be substantially more. So we're sort of shifting the dial a little bit in terms of what the key drivers or levers, as I'd refer to in a supply chain, and how we manage those within a business. And as Professor Mamun has mentioned, technology is going to be a key part to, I suppose, giving us information and visibility, and the use of analytical tools for predictive analytics, the consideration of how we balance automation and robotics in our supply chains. And again, I mean, I'm in a part of the world where the majority of our businesses are small businesses rather than the large multinationals that can afford some of that investment. So you've got to balance cost of building this resilience into your supply chains against the risk, and how you mitigate that. I'm not quite sure whether I've answered your question, but
so Prof, like Alan, I mean, you're mentioning about balancing this cost, right? And also the shift from just in time to just in case. Now, it's very interesting that you mentioned this, but could you share any specific examples of companies that adapted particularly well?
So the companies that adapted well, from what I have observed, are the ones that were strong in the analytics area of understanding and analytics and visibility, and those that had probably practiced in reality a risk mitigation strategy. So and that's really about sort of doing a bit of scenario planning and saying, you know, our main route for product from Europe, for instance, comes down through the Suez Canal. We all know what happened when one particular vessel got a bit stuck, and the consequence of that vessel getting stuck is obviously this bullwhip effect that takes a long time to get out of the supply chain. There's the knock-on delays. I suppose the companies that I saw that were doing okay during major disruptive events were those that had already thought through some strategies around what if. So a little bit of modeling, not to be doomsday sort of forecasters, but just to be a little bit more ready in terms of how they could switch suppliers, because they'd built that sort of redundancy into their supply chain of having a secondary supplier in a different part of the world that made them less vulnerable. And I think it's also important to think about what industry sector are you in, and whereabouts in the supply chain are you? Are you at the front end of the supply chain, or are you at the distribution end, the consumer facing end? Because the risk is different depending on where you are in that supply chain and depending on the industry sector. Because if you think about it, something like apparel, we get the majority of our apparel from Asia. So typhoons, weather events, and what have you makes that particular supply chain vulnerable to exposure of risk. Whereas food and beverage supply chains, for instance, generally tend to be a lot more local. So the risk is not quite so great if you sort of follow my silicon chips or computer communication equipment. The risk is high because, again, limited places that we source those from, limited number of suppliers. So any disruption there is likely to have a vast knock-on effect. So it is about understanding. So it is about understanding where you are in the supply chain, what your industry sector is, and how to plan for the worst in terms of what mitigation strategies you would implement in the event of it.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, Alan. And I'd like to bounce this back to you, Dr. Mamun. I mean, Alan was earlier talking about depending on where you are in the supply chain and having this preparedness, this plan B ahead of time, which is very crucial for the success of organizations to adapt in crises. But for yourself, from your experience, Dr. Mamun, what role do you see leadership in organization and culture, which you early touched upon briefly? How do these play in driving these changes?
Thank you. We have to think that few strategize from the leadership. Suppose we have to think about the micro supply chain instead of the macro supply chain. So in order to build the agility and the speed into your whole supply chain, we can create the micro supply chain that will be more finite and decentralized, agile mini operating models with the flexible supply contract and relationships with the manufacturing closer to the point of purchase. So the question will be that maybe our strategy will be like that, but it depends on the leadership.
Mm.
Buy while you make and make while you sell.
That's very
So
well said.
buy while you make and make while you sell. I like to give the example. It happens during the
Mm.
pandemic time. Suppose Malaysia, uh, one of the state, the Johor Bahru is lockdown, but in the another state, is the Penang is open. So the raw material is coming from the Penang, but Johor Bahru is a lockdown due to the Singapore situation. So unfortunately, they're going to receive the raw materials from there.
Mm.
Again, the factory in the Johor Bahru, so it's open. They can produce, they can go for the production. But unfortunately, they could not supply this one. They could not send these products to the other state in the lockdown. So now maybe we have to start to think this micro supply chain instead of the macro supply chain. This is the one. Second one, we have to think about the supply diversification. So already the Professor Allen also mentioned about this one. We have to assess the opportunities to diversify the supply base. Geographically, diversified supplies go on board in the event of an emergency. So maybe as a, that suppose the New Zealand or Australia, and if you come to the South Asian country like the India, Bangladesh, situation is different. So consideration should be given to the dual sourcing or triple sourcing for more critical components. So diversify supply. And another one thing is the supply chain strategize. We have to review. Nowadays is a dynamic world, so we have to review our existing supply chain strategies. So move away from an adversarial short-term approach to the long-term strategy of the driving value. We have to periodically have to test and revise our strategy to account for organizational growth, development, as well as the environmental change. Because the situation has been changed. So sometimes what I said earlier, once a time we use just in time, now we are using the just in cause based on the situation. So
Mm.
you have to change the strategy based on this one.
Mm.
Earlier, that suppose the once a time the company organization they're following the responsive supply strategy. Now they're thinking that okay, we have to move to the not possible to move to the directly efficient supply strategy. At least we have to the balance trade-off between the responsiveness and efficient supply strategy. And so that's why we need to review the strategize.
Mm. Mhm.
And then buyer supplier relationship should be digitalized. Our earlier concept was that very manual system, the traditional system. So now we are thinking that digitizing the buyer supplier relationship is a fundamental element for building robust supply chain. If you like to come to the resilient supply chain or robust supply chain, make sure that your technological advancement should be applicable in the buyer supplier relationship. So maybe in that case, you can apply that AI, artificial intelligence. We can apply that machine learning. Uh, we can apply the IoT, Internet of Things. We can apply the blockchain for security purpose, and definitely the big data. We need the data-driven supply chain strategy nowadays. What
Mm.
happens during the pandemic? If you look very carefully, our officially supply chain management started their journey in the 1980s, and then now is it 2025. So you understand, in terms of academic research, is not very rich. Still,
Yes.
we are doing a lot of research on that one. So
Mm.
that is the one of the issues, the big data. So you have to see the fact. Based on the fact, you have to come up with some decision. So this is some things we have to apply based on the technology advancement. So the supply chain could quickly switch to the alternative providers when the regular supply is facing any kind of disruption. So this is some of the strategies you can apply, but it depends on the leadership. They can think about this one.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's a leadership is very important in making sure you can have the best plans, but if it's not actioned, if it's not approved, right, then there's not going to be this follow-on effect. Now, Alan, I'd like to ask for yourself now, building on what Dr. Mamun said. Now, I think he briefly touched on things like IoT and the importance of visibility in digital tools. Like for yourself, what do you think are some of the steps that organizations can really take to create these kind of supply chains, which are not just robust but also resilient?
Yeah, I agree totally with Dr. Mamun in terms of the need for visibility, for real-time tracking, for security in transfer of information. So that was where he was referring to the likes of blockchain as being a mechanism to strengthen that aspect within a supply chain. And I think, and interestingly, the likes of blockchain hasn't had as wider adoption as one would have perhaps initially thought. And there's a couple of reasons for that, I think, is because as procurement people within an organization, you typically build relationships that you feel are trusted anyway. And so you don't go that extra step necessarily to build the security around the information transfer within that relationship. But I think over time, as these technologies become more readily available and resources are brought into companies that understand how these technologies will add value to the organization, then I think you'll see wider adoption of it. But certainly the role of technology in mitigating supply chains challenges is very important. Digital supply chain management, so we're talking there about cloud-based collaboration tools, even digital twins as a mechanism to model alternate scenarios, to test, what would we do, or how do we optimize our responses and things like that. Dr. Mamun mentioned machine learning, I think, in terms of, and AI in terms of learning for risk management. And I earlier mentioned the prospect of an increasing amount of robotics and automation, basically to de-risk the labor component within supply chains. And we're seeing autonomous vehicles and for delivery, because there's a driver shortage, for instance, particularly long haul and what have you. So we're going to see increasing use of technology in those respect. The other aspect to think about, I suppose, is cybersecurity, and the fact that we're seeing an increasing incidence of cyber attacks, and particularly on major logistics organizations, the likes of Maersk and being attacked last year, and disrupting or creating that disruption. So cybersecurity, I think, is going to be an increasing aspect that businesses are going to want to think about to minimize risk exposure in their supply chains.
And Alan, now you're mentioning this adoption of technology and the utilization of it, right? With blockchain, AI, machine learning, and now finally even the threat of cyber attacks. Now, are there any industries leading the way in adopting these technologies?
Ooh, that's a great question. Are there any? I'm going to be a little bit careful in terms of, I obviously work with some of these organizations, so for privacy reasons, I can't actually, I can't really disclose the names of those companies, but I think they're, I suppose what I'd say is I've seen an improvement over the last 3 or 4 years in the adoption of technology to create that visibility and to create that security around the organization's supply chains. And there has been a sort of a step up in that whole process. I don't know whether Professor Mamun wants to comment on that.
Thank you. Basically, this question when you're asking, the question is that percentage of the using of the modern technological advancement.
Mm,
Already, Alan mentioned about this one that they're moving to that our traditional supply chain strategy to the advanced technological advancement supply chain strategy. But we cannot assume that they're using 100% because
mm,
there are the other issues.
mm,
Because you understand the human resource involvement is there. So this is also the balancing that when you apply the technology, there are a lot of human resource, they are losing the job. So there is another issue and sometimes very difficult to manage. So they are moving to that level. But as you raise this issue that you see, if you apply that technology, you can mitigate the risk management. Already Alan mentioned about this issue. So there is a destination we have to apply, but we have to move to that level chronologically.
mm,
Say when you have the like the Asian countries, then you can understand that a lot of human resources are there involved. So you cannot move to the directly the 100% supply chain technology advancement there. It will take time, but that is a destination. That's why we are doing this kind of seminar, this kind of podcast, and other
mm,
things, awareness building. One of the target is that awareness building, and we have to find out the some of the like the exit plan on the analog system to digitalization. But we always mention one thing is that we are not ignoring the human. Even the Industrial Revolution 5.0, if you review very carefully, we like to mention this: the technology must be there, machine must be there, but we cannot ignore the human resource. Human resource must be the part of that technology advancement. So that is another integration, human and the machine. How we can do this integration? It also depends on the
mm.
leadership, and it also depends on the like this quality issues as well, and make sure that there will be no unethical practice will be there. So with the ethical practice, we have to make sure that technology must be there.
And Dr. Habib, now I want to follow on from what you mentioned. Look, technology is clearly a game changer, right? But and you mentioned we should not forget the human element in it. Now, how do you see these global disruptions impact the supply relations, the logistic networks, and how can the technologies that we have utilize and help address these challenges?
If you look very carefully, if you ask the disruptions,
Mm,
we are visualize particularly the few area like port to factory.
mhm.
So how we can unload the products from the port and then send the products from the port to the factory. So
Yes.
and second one, the storehouses. So your storehouses means retailers. So the location of the retailers, then how we can transfer this product. And how about your delivery channel? This is a very key point. Like we can see the disruption from the port to factories, storehouses, and delivery channel. If you look very carefully, our existing challenges for logistic network,
Mm,
the first of all will be the poor infrastructure. So insufficient integration of the transport networks, then warehouses and distribution facilities are not very well equipped. So the poor infrastructure is one.
mm,
Second one, when you talk about the global supply chain, we have to make sure the trade regulations. So now we have to think that like the not only regulation in the one country, you have to think about the like the local authorities regulation, regional regulation. So in the international level, what type of regulation you have to follow? So trade regulation is another issue. This is very important that what type of currency we have to use. Is it the USD or the
mm,
ruble or the maybe the other country?
mm,
And the third one, the train human resource. Unfortunately, our those people that's working in this area, supply chain management area. So as it is a new concept of supply chain management, earlier we use the logistic, earlier we use the transportation only, inventory. But when you
mhm,
say the supply chain, it is the integration of the all. So
mm,
that time the question is that train human resource we have or not. Unfortunately, we notice we have some lackings there. So look very carefully, poor infrastructure, trade regulation, and then the train human resource. So how can we resolve this one? So we can start in the decentralization we already mentioned earlier, and definitely the small batch production. We already mentioned. and with the automation. So when you have the automation, maybe you can move to the small batch production very quickly. Definitely, always policymakers, they are thinking the in terms of profit. But if you can show the reason of why you like to do this one, then you can think. If you apply the technology, then you can see you can go to the rapid wholesale digitalization. Maybe the our existing paperwork will move to that one. I like to give you the two examples. Say
Mm.
IoT application in our
Yep.
existing transportation.
Okay.
Once a time, that suppose our truck will be used by the driver, so there's carrying the product from the one place to another place. So 30 years before. So that time there is no mobile device, there was no vehicle tracking system or GPS system. So that is very difficult to track. But now it is technology is there. Even
Yes.
you are in the deep sea, we can apply the vehicle tracking system. So you can track the where are you now. So you see, there is I would use the term, there is no lacking of information.
Mm.
In order to mention that flow of information, this kind of IoT application is very important. During the COVID time, we are facing the issues with the human resource. We don't have the enough human resources. Not only just the COVID time, even also the other geopolitical supply chain disruption. So maybe that time that this kind of like the automation, robotics will be the one of the we would not say use the term the replacement, one of the option we can apply.
Hmm.
So again, technology will be there. Even the Walmart, even if it's in the Tesco, they are also keeping some of the stage. And then you understand when you are doing the like the people they don't want to come to the retailers. They like to stay at their home. So now we have to make sure that online transaction, how we could ensure that this kind of e-technological advancement there. So they'll give the order to the online, and they have to receive the product also at their home. So
Mm.
maybe we can apply also there is something e-technological advancement, particularly payment issue and other issues. Some of the things we can think how the
Yes.
technology could address in the supply chain area.
I think like with technology, at the end of the day, it's it's good for its utilization, makes things a lot easier and everything. But it's also very important that to build that trust, right, that between businesses and suppliers. Now, I'd like to get your opinion, Alan. How do you think businesses can rebuild that trust between suppliers after like major disruptions?
Yeah, it certainly comes down to the human interface with those businesses.
Yes.
So while we've talked about technology and that providing us with the tools of visibility and analytics, um, it nevertheless comes down to you have two organizations, two companies, one a supplier, one a customer,
Yep.
and people within those two businesses. Disruptions create strain on supplier relationships without a doubt.
Mm.
Because of supplier shortages or price volatility, delayed deliveries, broken contracts, trust dependency issues, those sorts of things, and
Mm.
even supplier financial instability. So you've just got to, I suppose, take a long-term view of how you rebuild those sort of fragmented relationships, because, as I said, those kind of events create frustration for you as a customer from your supplier.
Yeah.
And even as a supplier supplying a customer, because in a disruptive environment, there can be frustration the other way as well.
Yeah.
So customers can be equally frustrating at times to deal with. And I think you've just got to take a step back, a deep breath, and say, if you excuse the expression, shit has happened,
Yes.
and we need to find a way to move forward. and we need to strengthen what it is we do together, and find new and improved ways. And it does come down to the people within those organizations. So we're not saying that technology is going to replace people, because the relationship is always going to be human-based.
Yes,
it will be in my lifetime, put it that way.
Well, hopefully it'll be continuing that before AI overlords take over everything. Now, Dr. Alan, Dr. Mamun and Alan, both of you bring such rich academic and practical expertise to the table, right? From your conversations on disruptions, on technology utilization, on technology digitalization, predictive analytics, AI, machine learning, and all of this. Now, how can businesses connect with you to explore supply chain challenges and solutions in greater depth? I'll start with you, Dr. Habib.
Thank you.
Yes.
Very good question. If you identify myself, I'm the full academics. At the same time, I'm involved with the industry as a consultant. I'm involved with industrial training. I'm involved with the industry re-engineering. And we are also working the industry-based research project, particularly the problem solving. So in the area of supply chain management. At the same time, I have as you know, that I'm the PhD supervisor. So by all PhD scholars, they're working on the supply chain area based on some of the practical application. So maybe what we can do, that is that we can do some interaction, academia and industry. At the same time, we can arrange some of the industrial training program, and maybe then you can research project, industry based. We can give some of the, not only just advice, we can also give the solution, real life solution. So because it's very important nowadays, even we are doing the academic research is not fruitful if we couldn't apply in the industry. But we happen to this kind of interaction. Maybe expert get this, they can arrange this kind of situation for us. So we like to work with these two groups, academia and industry. And ultimately, our target is that create the smart, agile, industry-driven, resilient supply chain, maintaining the ecosystem. We cannot ignore the environment. We cannot ignore the situation. So we like to work on this one, like the academia, industry, as well as government policy. So this three group, the triangle group, we have to work, and that is the way that, from my academic side, we can invest our effort to do this one, and definitely we have to get the solution for the better development, how we can move to the next level. So that is the ultimate target, because we can predict, but now we have to time to apply this prediction in the industry, how they can move to the next level. So maybe we can work together in that area.
Well, talking about moving on to the next level and applying, what you've predicted, Dr. Mamun, do you have any upcoming projects or collaborations or publications that listeners out there should really look out for?
Yeah, basically, ExpertGate, we have some series on the supply chain.
Yes.
Talk, global supply chain, and then international supply chain management. And at the same time, I have a few PhD at this moment is going on. One is a blockchain in the agriculture supply chain management. And another one is that technology-driven supply chain management, the R&D area. We are also working on that. And recently, we published a few publications on the blockchain and AI-based. And we also planning to work in the different industry, like technological advancement in the different industry supply chain management.
Yes.
So this ongoing research, maybe we can get some of the update in the near future from there.
Sounds wonderful. And how about yourself, Alan? I mean, how can businesses better connect with you to explore supply chain challenges and, more importantly, the solutions in greater depth?
Certainly. I mean, obviously they can connect with me through ExpertGate, and the contact details are there. I suppose my background is that I would class myself as a pracademic rather than a pure academic. Okay, so I'm first and foremost a practitioner. My background is 40 plus years as a practitioner, and I've been in academia probably for the last 18 in a part-time capacity, and so I really enjoy working on projects with organizations to create value first and foremost,
Yes.
to help those organizations create some resilience, and to look for innovative and perhaps solutions that not necessarily are out of the box, if that makes sense. So we do that based on a data-driven analysis in terms of understanding the business. We look at potential solutions and help organizations develop strategies. We can contribute in terms of in-house training, project-based consultancy, thought leadership. With University of Sydney, I run a capstone unit for a master's program, and I'm continuously looking for projects that basically we can do within industry with a small group of students, of 4 or 5 students, where they can apply their learnt skills to complete in essence, a consulting project free of charge for those organizations that embark in this, and they get that support from academia to develop and provide those solutions. So a range of ways you can engage with me, whether it's on a consultancy basis, on an education basis, on engaging in a project with some university students completing their final unit in their master's program. Pretty much, I suppose that's the scope.
Oh, that's great to hear, Alan. It's wonderful to see that your approach is very aligned to the heart of ExpertGate ourselves, right? The combination, the bridging of academia and industry, knowledge and practice. And as a academic, as you mentioned, what kind of businesses would you say or industries would benefit most from reaching out to you?
Pretty much any size and scale. I've got to say that over the years, I've probably worked with 150 odd organizations in pretty much every industry sector. So up in airlines, down in coal mines and banks and FMCG. They've all got challenges in regards to supply chains, logistics, inventory management, warehousing, strategy, procurement. Every business has those challenges where they get, I suppose, embroiled in the day-to-day doing the business, but don't get the chance to take a step back, get in a helicopter and look down and understand the opportunities. So in essence, as I say, we work with everything from small one-man businesses, entrepreneurs looking to start up companies, up to the multinationals, government departments, NGOs. We sort of, I suppose, if you think you've got an opportunity to improve or want to see what opportunity there might be to improve, then have a conversation with us, if nothing else.
Wonderful. Well, look, this has been an eye-opening conversation. It's clear that adapting to supply chain disruptions requires a combination of innovative strategies, resilient systems, and collaboration between industry and academia. Dr. Mamun, Alan, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. For our listeners, I encourage you to connect with our guests to explore further these topics. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Expert Talk. Don't forget to subscribe to us and join us next time as we continue to bridge the gap between knowledge and practice. This is ExpertGate for everyone, everywhere.